Welcome back to Feeling Good Feels Good. I am your host, Dr. Tripp. This is the podcast where we make feeling good feel easy and simple. And we're even going to make this process a lot more fun. All of the same great information, tips, history, anthropology, tools, hacks, and everything you've come to expect in these episodes, but we're weaving it into a story. And that story is a mystery. Each episode still has one topic, but it's now going to be your job to figure out what that topic is by listening to the story. These stories will follow one fake patient, and they will be riddled with clues, from the name of the patient, the signs, the symptoms, and other random hints about what this patient needs, which will be the very topic of the episode. Once the topic is uncovered, you can expect all the same useful applications and exciting ways to use this information. All right, I want you to meet somebody. His name is Ricky D. Yang, 38 years old. And when he walked into my office, the first thing he said to me was, "Doc, my whole body hurts. Like, all of it. And every single day. Not his back, not his shoulder, not his knee, his whole body." Now, when a patient says that to you, there are a lot of directions you can go. But something about Ricky made me slow down, because Ricky didn't look like a man in crisis. He looked more like a man who had made peace with something. He had settled into it, and almost like he had built his entire life around it, around the way he felt, and the way he felt was not good. And there's something about that. A person who has stopped fighting and started negotiating with their own pain that tells a little bit more about the story and how to help them. So one of the first things I might ask a patient is, "Tell me about a normal day." He actually laughed at himself. He said, "There is really nothing normal about my day." This man runs his own IT company, a solo operation. Building it up, it's already up, but it takes a lot of work. The name of his company is Sunny Days Data. His whole thing is making sure that clients never lose their work, there's no crashes, no disasters, and everything is protected. He's very good at it, and he loves it. But here's the problem that Ricky has. The more hours he puts in the computer, the more money he makes. And the more hours he puts into his computer, the more his body breaks down. So he spent the last 4 years doing math on himself, figuring out the exact number of hours he can work before his body stops cooperating that night and the next day. Too many hours, and he can't get out of bed. Too few hours, and he can't get his company up and running, and he can't make his money. He told me he feels like Goldilocks and the Three Little Bears every single day. Not too much, not too little, just the right amount to survive. And that's what he's doing right now. So I asked him, "Ricky, Mr. Yang, what do you actually want? Like, if your body worked the way it was supposed to, what does your life look like?" He didn't even hesitate. He said, "I want to go hiking again. I want to build up my team so I'm not doing everything alone, and I want to spend my weekends outside." He used to love that. When he was a kid, he was always climbing trees, exploring, hiking. He was the kind of kid who came home every day, dirty, skin knees, but with a smile on his face. Somewhere between then and now, that kid got buried under a desk, and a pattern of habits developed, and a body that once worked well has stopped cooperating. Now, before I tell you about what I found in my exam, I want you to start paying attention, because there's clues in this story. There have already been clues in what I have told you. His name, his company, some of the things about his life, even the way his day is structured. And there will be more. Listen to the things he's eating, the way his day is structured, and you might pick up on a couple subtle hints. By the end of this episode, even if you haven't figured it out, I will tell you what it is that Ricky needs. But think of this like a mystery, except the solution may be something that helps you and changes the way that you or someone you care about feels every single day. All right, let's get into it.
Welcome to Feeling Good Feels Good with Dr. Tripp.
Welcome to a state of feeling good. It's how we live and how you could. Just know it's how we're all meant to be. If things are off, listen to your body. It can tell us exactly what we need. Physical, emotional, nutritional, or mentally. No need to worry, it's reached accessibly. No matter how you felt or what you've heard, well-being's for everyone, it's what you deserve. Ease and joy are yours once it's understood. No need to fear, because feeling good feels good.
information in this podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice and should not be interpreted as a diagnosis, treatment, or prescription. Listening to this podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. Always consult your own healthcare providers before making any changes to health, medications, or treatment plans. The opinions shared here are based on clinical experience, research, and professional knowledge, but they may not apply to any specific situations. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge and agree to these terms.
So, first appointment. Ricky sits down across from me and I start doing what I always do. I'm already watching this patient. How are they walking in? I'm watching them before I even ask a single question. How do they move? How does this guy carry himself? Can I see where he's holding tension? Because the body tells you things before the patient even opens up their mouth. And what I noticed about Ricky was this. He sat down very carefully. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't like a new agonizing pain. It wasn't a performance. It was like a man who had learned exactly how to lower himself into a chair without shocking his system. It was deliberate. It was calculated, which matches his history. He's very calculated about everything he does. The way someone moves when they've been in enough discomfort long enough that every physical action becomes a small engineering task. His posture was forward, shoulders were rounded. No surprise there for somebody who works IT. It wasn't like a lazy posture, but it was someone who had been contracting around discomfort for a long time. There's a difference, and once you've seen enough patients, you can tell. So, one thing I wanted to know about was his rest. I asked him about his sleep, and this is when everything started to unravel. He told me he cannot get going in the morning, like at all. His alarm goes off, he snoozes 10 to 15 times, he just does not feel rested, and his body refuses to have energy to get him up. Late in the morning, sometimes closer to noon, he's finally feeling a little bit more like himself. And then he has this narrow window, maybe 4 or 5 hours, where he actually feels sharp enough to do real work. So he hammers through, head down, screen on, grinding it out. And by the time he's feel like he's done something meaningful, it's already dark outside. So dinner becomes DoorDash, whatever DoorDash will bring him, or whatever's in the snack drawer. His diet, he told me, and again, I'm quoting, he said he's embarrassed. He said it's high sugar, a lot of processed food, unhealthy fats. His favorite drink is Sunny D, and his favorite snack is Sun Chips. Hint, hint. Sit with those last two for a second. Now, I asked him about his medical history. You'll see things start to click into place. Ricky has been to his primary care doctor multiple times in the last 2 years. His liver markers are elevated. His kidney markers are off. His LDL, which is his bad cholesterol, is high. It's high enough that his doctors put him on a statin. And since starting that statin, his body has gotten significantly worse. He said, Doc, I felt bad before, but now I feel like one solid block of pain. I asked what his doctor said about that. He shrugged. He said they told him to give it time for his body to get used to it. So I continued to learn more about what else might he be doing. Are you spending time outside? And he looked at me like I asked him if he had been to the moon. He said, Doc, by the time I wake up and the good part of my day is going, the day is already gone. And by the time I'm done working, it's dark. I don't really get outside that much anymore. And almost as an afterthought, he said, when I was a kid, I was always outside. Honestly, I miss it. Now let's talk about what I found when I actually examined him. First thing I found was his strength, specifically his muscle strength. The big muscles closest to the center of his body, his proximal muscles, his hip abductors, his hip extensors, his shoulder abductors, the muscles that are supposed to anchor everything else, they were not strong. I tested his posture. I used something called Trendelenburg's test. Basically, stand on one leg and watch what happens to the opposite side of his body. And when he stood on one leg, he almost fell over. So I could tell that some of the muscles that are supposed to help him are basically just not doing their job. Now, I see this in patients who have structural problems, nerve problems, hip problems, but I also see it in patients who have muscles that simply don't have enough fuel to fire properly, enough nutrients to work consistently. So keep that in mind. And when I asked him to stand on one leg with his eyes closed, forget about it. He was almost falling over and hurting himself even more. That balance is a conversation between your muscles, your joints, and your nervous system. When that starts to break down in someone this young, I again start thinking about what's going on systemically. What's the fuel in this body? Are these muscles really getting their signals? Are they energized enough to respond? Then I had an inkling. I had a thought, something I don't always do, but something I felt like I should do in this particular exam. I pressed on his sternum, his chest bone, and he winced significantly. Now that might sound strange. Why would I push on this person's chest? Because bone tenderness on palpation, specifically the sternum and the shin, is a classic sign of soft bones. And that's what happens with certain vitamin deficiencies when they go on long enough. Bones stop mineralizing properly. They become tender to direct pressure. And when I pressed on Ricky's shin, he flinched the same way. So I'm giving you these clues as I found them. You are playing along and seeing this from my perspective. Now, let me give you one more clue. One more clue that helped tie a lot of things together. In traditional Chinese medicine, one of the oldest systems on the planet, there is a concept called kidney yang deficiency. Yang in Chinese literally means sun. The character for yang depicts the sun rising over a horizon. Yang energy is warmth, movement, vitality, the fire that gets you out of bed in the morning. Kidney yang deficiencies looks like this: cold limbs, fatigue worse in the morning, low back weakness, poor motivation, depression, foggy thinking. Sound like anybody we're talking about. And in traditional Chinese medicine, the kidney system governs the bones. The liver system governs the smooth flow of energy. So with the elevated liver markers, compromised kidney function, bone pain, morning fatigue, and zero yang energy, these traditional Chinese medicine practitioners know exactly what they're looking at, and they've known this for thousands of years. They just didn't have a name for that molecule at the beginning. Okay, Ricky D. Yang. Let's start with the first clue. His name, Ricky. Sounds like rickets, the childhood bone disease caused by severe vitamin D deficiency. Soft bones, bowed legs, and we'll get to some more of that history in a minute. D. I literally gave you this in his middle initial. Vitamin D. The answer was quite literally there the whole time. Yang, I already gave you this a little bit more. In Chinese, the character depicts the sun rising over the horizon. Yang is warmth, energy, movement, and Ricky is low in all of these. Sunny Days Data was the name of his company. He named his entire company after the sun, and he hasn't even seen the sun in years. Sunny D and Sun Chips were his favorite snack that he's always reaching for, getting nothing but sugar and processed fat. Ricky D. Yang, Rick gets vitamin D deficiency, Yang deficiency, every piece of the history, his name, the company, his snacks, his labs, and even the difference between now and his childhood was pointing to the same answer. The first thing I recommended to Ricky was vitamin D, and not as a supplement. That conversation came second. But first, I just told him it was happening, that his body wasn't broken, it was starving for something that most of human history was completely free and actually unavoidable: sunlight. Let me explain what's actually happening in Ricky's body, because once you understand the machinery, everything else about this story makes perfect sense. First, and this one may sound a little strange, vitamin D is not technically a vitamin. A true vitamin is something that your body cannot make and must get entirely from food. Vitamin D doesn't qualify. Your skin manufactures it from sunlight. What it actually is, corticosteroid. That is the same molecular backbone as testosterone, estrogen, and cortisol. Scientists named it a vitamin in the early 1900s. This was before they understood what it was, and the name just stuck. It shouldn't have. Here's how it works. Deep in the lower layers of your skin sits a cholesterol compound. When UVB rays hit your skin at the right wavelength, that compound absorbs the energy and its molecular ring breaks open. A purely photochemical reaction. No enzymes, just light and cholesterol. Body heats, then converts that broken molecule into vitamin D3. It travels through the liver, which makes the storage form. Then the kidneys convert it to the fully active hormonal form, calcitriol, which enters the cell and regulates your genes. Over 900 genes from sunlight hitting the skin. Now, here is why Ricky is getting almost none of this. Ricky is a 38-year-old African American male. Melanin, the pigment in darker skin, absorbs UVB radiation. So, melanin, the pigment which makes skin darker, actually absorbs the UVB radiation. This is the same rays that make vitamin D. Because of the melanin, he needs significantly more sun exposure than someone with lighter skin to produce the same amount of vitamin D. And he's getting zero. His schedule keeps him indoors. And they keep him indoors through the only window that actually matters, roughly 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., when the sun is high enough for UVB to actually penetrate the atmosphere, and his diet is high in healthy fats, contributing to higher body fat. And vitamin D is fat soluble. It gets sequestered into adipose tissue and locked in. Research shows that fat tissue of a typical adult contains several months' worth of vitamin D that the body simply cannot access. His liver and his kidney markers are off, and those are the two organs responsible for converting vitamin D into its usable form. He cannot synthesize it efficiently. He can't activate what little he has. And then there's the statin. This is the part that I want every clinician listening to this to really sit with. Statins block the enzyme called HMG CoA reductase. The enzyme controlling that pathway makes cholesterol, but it also makes the precursor for vitamin D synthesis in the skin, and it makes the precursor for CoQ10, coenzyme Q10, the electron shuttle inside your mitochondria that generates ATP, energy, your cellular energy currency. Muscles run on ATP, and CoQ10 is depleted. Muscle cells cannot produce energy efficiently. Mitochondrial function degrades, and research shows that statins reduce circulating CoQ10 by 16 to 54%. One drug blocking the pathway, quietly depleting three things simultaneously: cholesterol, vitamin D precursor, and CoQ10. And the presenting symptom of all three of these overlaps perfectly: muscle pain, joint pain, fatigue, weakness. His whole body hurts. All of it, every single day. And now we're starting to understand why. So here's what I love about vitamin D. It's ancient, genuinely ancient. Phytoplankton, single-celled organisms in the ocean, have been synthesizing vitamin D from UVB rays for over 750 million years. This is one of the oldest biochemical reactions on planet Earth. When the first organisms crawled out of the ocean onto land, they brought this process with them. For most of human evolutionary history, vitamin D deficiency was essentially impossible. Our ancestors lived outside, hunted outside, built and traveled under the open sky. Their skin made vitamin D every single day without a second thought. But then things have started to change. The first evidence of widespread deficiency doesn't come from modern times, it comes from ancient Rome. A 2018 study examined nearly 3,000 skeletons from 18 cemeteries across the Roman Empire. They found evidence of rickets in more than 1 in 20 ancient children. Even with Mediterranean sunshine, because urban density, tall buildings, narrow streets, crowded indoor living, it was already blocking the sun 2,000 years ago. Roman physician Soranus described bony deformities in infants in the 1st and 2nd century AD. They knew something was wrong, but they did not know what. Hippocrates prescribed sunlight exposure for systemic disease in 400 BC. He called it heliotherapy. He didn't know why it worked, he just knew patients who got sunlight recovered better. The Greeks built solar healing temples. The Egyptians designed architecture specifically to channel sunlight. Even Herodotus, the Greek historian, observed that Persian soldiers had softer skulls than Egyptian shoulders, noting it was because of the headwear that Persians wore. It blocked their heads from sunlight. He was almost certainly describing early vitamin D related deficiency, contributing to bone softening 2,400 years ago. But the story that mirrors Ricky most closely is the Industrial Revolution. When people move from rural, outdoor labor into urban factories, indoors, in coal blackened skies and crowded tenements with small windows, vitamin D deficiency exploded. Rickets became epidemic. Children's legs bowed, bones softened. It was called the English disease. A 2024 study found evidence of seasonal vitamin D deficiency in 76% of teeth sampled from an industrial England cemetery site. These weren't people who had chose to avoid the sun. These were people whose economic circumstances moved them indoors and kept them there. You know who else was probably walking around with rickets? Tiny Tim from A Christmas Carol. Historians have long believed his symptoms, the weakness, the bone fragility, the inability to walk properly, pointed directly to severe vitamin D deficiency. Dickens was writing about the industrial poor, children who never saw sunlight. Ricky didn't choose to stop going outside either. His pain took that from him, and gradually, without anyone naming it, he became a 21st century version of the factory worker, indoors, under artificial light, grinding through hours that never included the sun. And here's the part of the story that is specific to Ricky in a way that almost nobody talks about in medicine openly. Human skin tone is not arbitrary. Melanin evolved as a natural sunscreen for populations living near the equator, where UV radiation is intense year-round and genuinely dangerous in excess. It is a brilliant adaptation for life around the equator, but evolution is slow and human migration is fast. The body has not had time to adapt, and for centuries, nobody built that reality into a medical conversation. An African American man in November through March cannot make meaningful vitamin D from sunlight even if he tries. The UV index is simply too low. At a schedule that keeps him indoors during the only productive sun hours, compromised liver and kidney function, adipose and fat tissue, and a statin, and you have Ricky. This is not a personal failure. This is physiology, meeting history, meeting environment and geography. The chemical compound was finally identified in the 1930s. By the 1920s, researchers already discovered that irradiating food with UV light could prevent rickets. Food exposed to artificial sunlight could protect children who never saw the sun. This is why we started seeing fortifying milk with vitamin D. It worked. Rickets essentially disappeared from the developed world by the 1950s. And then we moved indoors again, built our economy around screen work and indoor offices, and vitamin D deficiency came back, quietly, in the form of achy bodies, low moods, chronic pain that nobody could quite explain. And for Ricky D. Yang, the answer was always in the name. So what did I actually tell Ricky to do? Get the blood test first. It's called 25-hydroxyvitamin D. It's a simple blood draw. Ask your doctor to order it. If you want to know your number and not guess, optimal is generally 50 to 80 nanograms per milliliter. The conventional medical threshold for deficiency is 20, meaning you can test at 21 and get told you're fine and still be operating well below the potential for how good your body can feel. Supplement vitamin D3. This is the same form that your skin makes. For someone with Ricky's profile, a functional medicine practitioner would likely start anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 IUs daily and retest in about 8 to 12 weeks. Always take it with a meal containing healthy fat. Vitamin D is fat soluble. It needs fat for absorption. And always pair it with vitamin K2 because vitamin D increases calcium absorption and K2 is what directs that calcium to your bones instead of your arteries. D3 without K2 is like hiring a construction crew with no foreman. The materials show up, but nobody is telling them where to go. I would add magnesium. Most people miss this entirely. Multiple enzymes in the vitamin D conversion process are magnesium dependent. Supplementing vitamin D without adequate magnesium can actually worsen magnesium depletion. Magnesium glycinate before bed. It also helps support sleep. And we know that Ricky has a sleep problem, and it's probably not a coincidence. Magnesium is likely low too. Talking to his prescribing doctor about CoQ10. If he's on a statin, and tens of millions of Americans are, there is evidence, mixed evidence, about whether CoQ10 fully resolves statin-associated muscle pain, but it has shown some promising data. Not every study shows dramatic benefit, but the mechanism is real. The depletion is documented, and the side effect profile of CoQ10 is essentially non-existent. The most bioavailable form is ubiquinol, the reduced active form, especially for anyone over 40. Ubiquinol is best. So get outside and move. Here's something that people don't know. Exercise triggers lipolysis, the breakdown of fat and the use of fat for fuel. And when that fat is mobilized, vitamin D stored in that fat tissue gets released into circulation at the same time. Exercise literally unlocks vitamin D your body has been storing in your fat. You don't need a gym, 20 minutes walking outside in the midday with your forearms and face exposed. That's the prescription. Starting there, anchor the morning with light. Ricky's circadian rhythm is broken. His cortisol awakening response, that natural hormone spike that's supposed to happen within 30 minutes of waking up to get you going, it's basically stunted. Morning outdoor light exposure is the most powerful reset for that system. Not a phone screen, actual outdoor light. Even on a cloudy day and within 30 minutes of waking up, this one change begins shifting the entire hormonal pattern that has Ricky locked into late starts and late crashes. None of this requires expensive equipment. None of it requires a full life overhaul. It requires understanding what the body actually needs, and then systemically, patiently giving it those things. So I think about the Rickies of the world a lot, not because his case was complicated. Honestly, once the picture came together, it was one of the clearest clinical stories I'd seen for a while. I think about him because of what he said when I explained it all. He got quiet for a second, and then he said, "So you're telling me that the thing that's been wrecking me is that I stopped going outside?" And I said, "Kind of, yeah." And he laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had spent years and real money and enormous energy trying to solve a problem that had a profoundly simple answer. And that answer was hiding in plain sight, in his name, in his company name, in the snacks he reached for every afternoon without knowing why. Some part of Ricky knew. He named his company Sunny Days. He reached for Sunny D every day. His body was telling him constantly, in the language of craving and exhaustion and the memory of a kid who climbed trees, what he needed. He just didn't have the translation yet. But that's what this show is for. Ricky got his levels tested, severely deficient, not surprised. He started supplementing. He talked to his doctor about CoQ10. He started taking 10 minutes at noon to walk. Just 10 minutes. He got sun on his face, sun on his forearms. He was taking the vitamin D3 supplements and the magnesium supplements. And a few months later, he told me that the mornings were getting easier, that Goldilocks math about finding what's just right was shifting. He was getting more good hours back, that he had even gone on his first short hike in years, and it hadn't wrecked him. He didn't have to lay in bed for 3 days afterwards because his body was so sore. He said it felt like waking up, and that's what feeling good feels good means. Not perfect, not overnight, just waking up 1 degree at a time, making feeling good feel simple. Thank you all for listening and being a part of the story. I can't wait to see you all next week.